Oh, hi, what's going on? Doing adjustments, and people seem to think that it's scary. I'm just going to show you it's not scary, and there's nothing to be afraid of, and there's no reason why you can't do this kind of stuff yourself. I'll walk you through how I set all that stuff up as we go along. We're going to adjust the truss rod and action, height, intonation, everything like that, and kind of show you guys that this is definitely all stuff you can do at home by yourself with only a couple tools. So first thing that I want to do is start by getting the guitar tuned up. Plan on playing this in drop A. We're going to set it up as such, but yeah, step number one is a tuner. So I'm just going to clip that on the headstock, and then one thing about the Evertune, and I'll zoom in here so you can kind of see what I got going on here. The Evertune is all about balance. And my apologies for the shaky camera here. I'm going to try and zoom in here as best that I can. If you'll notice on my 6th string right now, it's loose. So this is what they call zone 1. This saddle is fully retracted in the backwards position. As I tighten it, what happens is now I'm in zone 2, and that's the Evertune part, so I can keep turning the tuner, and it just moves the internal mechanism in there until you reach the other stop, which is effectively zone 3. You can hear the tone change if I shut up. That's how you know you're in zone 3. So I like to keep it in zone 2 towards the edge, and right now it's a very low G sharp, so I definitely need to adjust that up. And so I'll take my Evertune key here, if it'll focus, and I'm going to slide that down inside the saddle. That's where the tuning peg is, and I'm going to begin to tighten it. And you'll notice when you tighten this, what you actually have to do at the same time is also tighten your tuning peg. And so right now I'm just barely flat. Oh no, it's right there. So I'll relax it, get in zone 2 again, make sure we're good. There's my A. So that string is tuned. Now we can move on to the next one, which would be, in my case, E. We got a C sharp right now. We're going to tighten again. And you'll notice as I tighten it, if you watch this saddle real closely, it'll actually start to fall down, because the internal spring is actually pulling on it. And that's where you want to do this easy way. It's kind of nice to do it with the tuner at the same time. As you tighten the Evertune piece, you tighten the tuner as you're setting the tuning. I found that's kind of the easiest way to do it. Okay, all tuned up. Now, the reason why you would tune this up is so that our next move is to adjust the truss rod. And I like to do all that before I start messing with string height. And I'll kind of show you how I do that. I'll move the camera here again. So, as an example, here is a truss rod that's not installed. I've recently started using these spoke wheel style truss rods. And just so that you understand, this is nothing to be terrified of, and we can kind of see the mechanics of how it works. I know there's a lot of fear about people cracking necks, that kind of stuff. As long as you're patient and you know what you're doing, it's not a big deal. So this is a dual action truss rod. When you spin it one way, it creates that neck relief, and you can see as I spin this in the clockwise direction, from if I was facing it this way, if I spin it as such, it actually creates a positive bow in it. And that will actually give you the neck relief or the reverse action of the string tension. If I spin it down the other way, it's going to have the opposite effect. What happens is now it creates a negative bow. And the nice thing about dual action is wood moves in environments and everything else, and sometimes you actually need that. In fact, I got one guitar with a flame maple neck that in the summertime I found I have to go past its neutral point and actually create a little extra tension because it bows out naturally on its own and the string tension isn't enough. This particular neck is also flamed maple, but the difference here is it also has carbon fiber reinforcement rods in it. So I'm going to move the camera a little bit so I can kind of show you what's going on here. This neck has carbon fiber rods. I already messed with the truss rod for the sake of demonstration purposes. So let's move on to the scary stuff. Two ways you can do this. You can actually use a tensioned string. You always want to adjust your truss rod with it under tension. That way you know how much you're adjusting it, unless you got some weird crazy fender that you have to remove the neck for. Yay, go you! I don't like that. Anyway, so you can use a straight edge or the string tension. I'm going to show you both methods in the event that you do not have a straight edge. So step number one is down here at the first fret. We're just going to push that down until it reaches the top of this fret. So we're just going to create a tiny little amount of tension. Then we're going to come over here to the 24th fret, and I'm going to use my pinky to create that as flat as I can, and I'm going to stretch as far as I can. And you see how much that string's bouncing? Let me zoom in. There we go. So again, first fret, 24th fret, right at the 12th, and look at all that bounce. You don't want that. You want your neck flat. That means that this neck has a negative bow to it. So the string tension is actually pulling the neck in a upwards or bowed type of direction. So in order to fix that, we're going to come over here to our handy dandy truss rod, and a huge shout out to truck driver Sean for convincing me to use these spoke wheel truss rods, because this thing is friggin' awesome. No stupid cover to deal with, none of that stuff. So what we want to do is actually turn this in the clockwise direction until it gets flat. Now, if you're new to truss rod adjustments and you're terrified, remember, go 1/8 of a turn at a time. And that's one of the cool things about these spoke wheel truss rods, is you only have so much room to turn it. You can't just put a wrench in there and go crazy. And then all you got to do is recheck everything. So again, 1st and 24th, and feel it. You still got some bounce. Turn a little bit more. 24, 1st. A little bit of bounce. Little bit of bounce is okay. I personally prefer them about as flat as I can get them. And right now, because of the carbon rods and because of the sake of making this video, this neck is almost perfectly flat with no tension on the truss rod. And so if I turn it, give it just a hair of relief, about 1/8 of a turn, now I've got just the teeniest little amount of bounce. I might one up it a little bit, and there we go. That's what we're after, is that tiny little amount. So there you go, truss rod adjustment. Super scary. All in all, I took this wrench from here, I went about 3 times, totaling about 1/4 of a turn of the truss rod, and that was enough to straighten it out. So next step is the nut. Now, in a perfect world, wherever you bought a guitar from should have already done this for you, but things happen. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. There we go. So here's our nut. Now, when it comes to nut height, you're kind of going to be doing a dance back and forth between the bridge and the nut. You might find that after you get your nut to the proper height, then you go back and you adjust the strings. You may find that you got to make another slight little tweak to the nut, and the primary purpose of the nut is just string location, but because I don't have a 0 fret, we also use it for height. So what I like to do is put my finger right here at the 3rd fret, and you're not pushing down crazy, right? You're not creating a bunch of tension in it. You just want it to rest on that fret, and then take the string right above the 1st fret and look at it. See how I got a little bounce in there? Just like when we adjusted the truss rod, we want to get rid of that bounce. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the string out. And by the way, this is, again, tuned to drop A, pretty low tension. I can pull on that fairly easily. If you need something, you can use another string, wrap it around, and use it to pull that out of the saddle. You can also back it off of the tuner and create less tension, and that will really help you adjust things. And so then I'm going to take my StewMac gauge nut slotting file and create just a little bit. And you want to do this little bit at a time. Little bit at a time. You don't want to go too crazy. Little pro tip for you: if you take your nut slotting file and you set it in the slot on the nut, and then you rest it across the frets, you can actually look right here at the 1st fret and see if there's a gap. If you have a big, huge gap, keep going. I actually do this until it's about flat. So I file just a little bit, and I get it to where it's just about touching. Nice shiny frets, you can use them as a gauge. And then take our string, we throw it back in the slot, and then we just recheck it, and we're looking for a little bit of bounce. And I still got a ways to go. So the nice thing about that little trick when you lay them in there like that is it kind of serves as a gauge as to how close you are. So again, a little bit at a time. You don't want to go crazy. You can always remove more material. It's real hard to put it back on. So it's best to just go a little bit at a time, like so. And then check it. Still got a little bit of bounce. I want just a teeny tiny little bit. One of these days I'm going to invest in the high-end gauge that actually measures, but there you can see it's just barely what you're after right there. Just the smallest little amount. Now the next step is string action. Pretty easy. So kind of try to get this the best way that I can here. Zoom out. My string action gauge is down in my shop. I'm upstairs in my music room, but quick easy thing to do is just measure each one, and you want to measure from the bottom of the string. So on my low E, or A string rather, I've got almost 1 millimeter. And down here on the high E, I've got, hard to see with all the strings in the way, about 1/2 millimeter. Now, I like to get the action as low as I can, and that's something I've really been chasing. So what I do then is so that's good. 1/2 millimeter, I'm gonna aim for that. Now I'm gonna come over here to my low E and I'm gonna kick it down just a hair and try to see if I can match that same 1/2 millimeter mark. And I don't know how well you can see what I got. Just about 1/2 millimeter, maybe a little fraction of a turn more, and then we'll do the same thing. Make sure it's tuned up. And that's pretty low. That is incredibly low action. I mean, you can see the force it takes me to push it down is almost nothing. This should be a nice, fast playing guitar. So now what I'm going to do is match that with all the other strings, and that will also give me the appropriate radius on it. This is a 14-inch radius fretboard. So once I match the radius on here, what I can then do is, if I need to adjust it, I can adjust all of these evenly, and we can bring it up. Best way to do that is just plug it in and play it. All right, next step is to adjust the intonation on here. And I'm just using a little Silver Shark clip-on tuner. And I'm going to have that on the headstock, but I want you to be able to see the bridge so you understand kind of what's going on here. First note is my A. C, huh? Oh, I over-tightened it. Okay, so there's my A, and if you see the saddle, I'm adjusting the tuner right now. Now that's too low, so it's not actually doing anything. And as I tighten it, you see that saddle start to raise just a little bit. That's how we know we're in zone 2. Now it's important to note on the Evertune, when you adjust the intonation, depending on how you're going to play it, if you're going to primarily play it in the zone 2 where you don't have the bending effect, then adjust it as such. But I have found through a little bit of trial and error that I like to bend a lot, and so what I'll do is I'll bring it up right to the edge of that bend point and I'll lock it in. So there it's moving. Then we back it off just a hair. So that's zone 2. And now when I hit it, you can hear I can still bend. So that's where you want to adjust your intonation. And the reason why I mention this and why I bring it up is because if you don't do it that way, what ends up happening is, because of the fulcrum of the saddle, it leans forward. That actually changes your intonation point. Seems like kind of a countermeasure. It shouldn't. The saddle should rotate in the other direction, but it's very, very subtle. If you're super picky about intonation, I highly recommend you find that zone 2, and that's where you want to put it when you set your intonation. So again, back it off, bring it right up till you hear the note change. And then back it off just a hair. And then we'll set our intonation. So right now I have an A. I'm a little bit sharp. I'm actually going to back it off just a little bit. Maybe I should have left it slightly sharp. Okay, there's my A. I'm a little bit flat here, so now I'm going to go to the back and I'm going to tighten it just a little bit. It's probably too much. Let's go small amounts here. I'm a little bit sharp. No, I went way too far. And that's how you intonate. So now I'm going to do the others.